Hello, everyone. Greetings of the day, namaste, and a warm welcome to Early Childhood Development Forum. I am Ms. Amrit Nagpal, the head of preschool and ECCEd at Birla Open Minds and a member of ECDF too. And today we are back again with a meaningful webinar. Wait for it, we'll let you know the topic soon. But before I jump in, I would like Dr. Vasavi, the chairperson of ECDF, to say a few words. Over to you, Dr. Vasavi.
Thank you, Amrit, and a warm welcome to everyone for today's webinar on a very interesting topic. It's the right brain, the left brain, or the whole brain. And today we have with us a really interesting panel who will be talking about this interesting topic. And before we start off, I would like to announce our upcoming global summit, which is going to be held on the 30th and 31st of this month, and we'll have back-to-back sessions from 3 o'clock in the evening to 6 p.m. IST, and I request everyone who is interested to join may come and register. For more information, you can log into our Facebook page. Over to you, Amrit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vasavi. So for those of you who have just tuned in onto our live, let me just tell you that experts tell us that 90% of our brain is not fully developed at birth, and it begins developing a little later. So to discuss about this interesting topic, that's right brain, left brain, or the whole brain, we've got our experts of panel. So come, let me introduce you to our panelists. First on our panel is Ms. Julie Kurtz. Ms. Julie, if you could wave a hi for our audience, they'll be able to spot you. She is the CEO and the founder at Center for Optimal Brain Integration. She also works with trauma-informed practices for early childhood educators. She's also the creator of a phone and tablet app, that helps trigger and stop sensory and emotional check designed specifically for children who are aged from 3 to 8 years of age. It helps to promote sensory and emotional literacy to help children self-regulate themselves. So that's Ms. Julie for everybody. Moving on, we've got Ms. Archana Madhusudhan, who's, yes, there she's waving a hi to everybody. She's a neuroscience practitioner, a language specialist, and she comes with more than 2 decades of work experience. And she's also a POSH certified practitioner. Then we've got Ms. Shamila Nazim. If you could wave a hi for the audience. She's a government approved nursery manager with more than 2 decades of work experience, and most of her work involves in providing nurturing environment, safe and stimulating environment for all children, enabling each child to grow, develop into unique and holistic way. That's such a wonderful thought, Ms. Shamila. So without wasting further time, let's jump on and let's start with the questions. So we've gathered a couple of questions for all the panelists that most of our audience would like to know. So the first round, I will be asking one common question to all the panelists. And each of you will get about 3 to 4 minutes to answer. And then we'll move to the second round. So my first question is to Ms. Archana. Ms. Archana, we know that the early years of development is extremely crucial. And one of the most important organ that is still developing is the brain. So when I say right brain or left brain or the whole brain, what are your initial thoughts on this?
Thank you, Ms. Nagpal. And yes, I think a very interesting topic this is. And I wouldn't like to mention it as left brain or right brain. In fact, I would refer to them as left hemisphere and right hemisphere of the brain. Okay, so like conventional wisdom tells us that our unique personality, thought processes, and behavior are influenced by whether we are right-brained or left-brained. Right-brained individuals are supposedly creative and big-picture thinkers, while left-brained individuals tend to be more analytic and logical. But recent studies have demonstrated that the left brain or the right brain inclined concept is a myth. Innumerable brain scans of more than 1,000 young people across age groups to determine whether one side of the brain was more active than the other concluded that there was no evidence of brain-sidedness. Therefore, the concept of being left-brained or right-brained is nothing more than a figure of speech, I must say. Indeed, not a scientific fact. So this finding resulted in development of the whole brain learning methodology, in which children are encouraged to accelerate their learning methodology and linking the logical and the creative minds. That said, efforts to develop the brain should definitely begin at a very early age. One of the main reasons is because of how fast the brain develops before birth and continues into early childhood. The most important years to build a strong foundation for the learning, health, and life success. So, distinguishing between the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, the left brain loves and desires order. Logical, literal, linguistic, it likes words. It's linear. It puts things into a sequence or order. Now, this is lauded as a preferred brain. The left has a systematic manner of understanding and learning. If nurtured correctly, children can prematurely unlock their potential to learn faster instead of counting on their adolescence to figure out on their own. Talking about the right brain, it is holistic and non-verbal. It sends and receives signals that allow us to communicate through facial expressions, eye contact, tone of voice, posture, and gestures. So the right brain values big picture thinking, the meaning and feel of an experience, such as emotions and personal memories. In other words, if the left brain focuses on the text, the right brain makes sense of the context. So having established this link, unlike adults, young children have brains with superpower. Findings have indicated that young children use both brain hemispheres to understand language. That's the reason that we see that they are like sponges, just absorb anything and everything you throw at them. Are we aware that the right brain develops first? Young children in their first 3 years are by default right-brained. They therefore do not have the ability to use logic and words to express their feelings. They live their lives completely in the moment. In other words, logic, responsibilities, and time do not make sense to them. The minute the toddler begins to ask why is when his or her left brain is beginning to kick in. This also answers why ages 2 until 7 matter so much for brain development and how crucial it is to provide the right brain training at this stage. No, I'm not talking about the right brain training. I'm talking about the correct brain training. Children's brain development is strongly influenced by the environment and interactions with people around them. Vision and hearing are the first to develop, followed by early language skill sets and cognitive functions. So for children to be equipped with social, cognitive, and emotional skill sets, development of both sides of the brain is crucial. So I would definitely say focus is more on whole brain development, Ms. Nagpal.
Thank you so much, Ms. Archana. I like the way that you've put it across, that how the right hemisphere develops, how the left hemisphere develops, and why the whole brain development is so important. Over to you, Ms. Shamila. What are your thoughts on the same?
Thank you so much, Archana. That was really, really well explained. The same thing, I'm going to just follow on with what Archana said, is that we all are very much aware that when a child's brain develops, it starts developing just even before the child's born. And for the first 3 years, it is completely right brain development that is in existence. It's your empathy, intuition, imagination, and creativity is the focus point here. We connect with the children. It's the relationships they have with us. That is the most important thing that we need to focus on. In fact, being a nursery manager, when we look at the baby room, the infants room, when we are doing our planning and the curriculum that does come about, we do not involve the cognitive side of planning at all. It's more the social, the emotional development, the physical development. Those are the ones that we nurture in those baby rooms, because we know that even if we do try to introduce the cognition side of things or the logical side of things, it's going to go way over them. That's not what they're interested in at that moment. Nothing has actually come about during those first few years to be able to make sense of the why that Archana mentioned in her explanation. So yes, for the first 3 years at least, we need to nurture the cognitive, the social, emotional development, the relationships we have with those babies. The trust factor is a huge thing. Eye contact, facial expressions. Those are all the things that we focus on when we plan for our baby's room. Yes, then as soon as I said, as soon as they start asking you why, you know that the left brain is kicking in. That is where we need to start thinking about how we're going to provide a holistic learning environment for those children. That's something I'm going to talk about when I have my my next session on, is how we create environments that will support the holistic child. And that means catering for the left brain and the right brain, because without that, we would have a child who only knows the logical side, only knows time, numbers, the destination of things, or we would have a child who's completely emotional. And we know as humans, we're not like that. We're actually a collaboration of both. We can't. We need to have a balance of both. And that's something that we need to be looking at when we're looking at the left or the right hemisphere of the brain. We're looking at another training session that I do with my staff is process versus product. So we focus on the process, because through the process, children are learning all aspects of what they're doing in the classroom or the activities that they've been, that we've exposed them to. The product is the destination, is the celebration point, but we need to be able to enjoy the process before we enjoy the product. So again, collaboration of both the left and the right hemisphere of the brain. That's basically in a nutshell of what I believe happens within the early years and what we need to do as early years educators to support that process. Thank you, Amrit.
Thank you. I like the way you've supported whatever Ms. Archana says, and then you've made it more stronger for most educators and parents to believe that yes, the right brain develops first, and hence we've got a lot of these songs, rhymes, music more in the first 3 years. So when you talk about the baby room, when we'll be working with toddlers, it's got to be more fun learning, more musical learning, so that the right brain completely, the right side of the brain wakes up, and then that is when they ask questions, why, with relation to their environment, that is when the left brain starts kicking in. So, Ms. Julie, what are your thoughts on the same?
It's so hard to follow both of them because it was just so well said. So I'll try to add some different things. Good morning for me from California in the United States, and I know it's evening for many of you. I'm really grateful to be here because when we're talking about the brain, we get rid of all differences and all divides globally. It's raising humane beings, right? It's raising a human to be strong socially and emotionally. And when we talk about the brain, it is infinitely complex. And we're simplifying it for the purposes of learning. And I think it's so important to look at the brain from a horizontal and a vertical lens. And horizontally, we're talking about left and right brain. And what Ms. Shamila and Ms. Archana said is exactly right on. So I think I'll do something a little different and talk about the vertical from the bottom up and build on that a little bit later. Children are born on the planet for the first time. And when they're born, the big part of their brain that's lit up is the bottom of their brain, which is in between the mouth and the base of the neck. We call it the survival brain or the hindbrain. And this part of the brain is designed to fight, flight, freeze, and to protect us and to allow our breathing to happen and make us tired. And babies have very immature sensory systems. So the number one thing that babies need in the first 2 years is adults in environments that are nurturing and responsive. over the course of 2 years with safe, nurturing, responsive, attuned relationships and environments that are predictable and safe, that part of the brain, the survival part that makes those babies cry all the time to communicate, starts to calm down. And you want to know what happens around the age of 2? The next part of the brain wakes up. Now, it doesn't always work this cleanly. For the purposes of my story, I'll share the middle part of the brain, which we call the limbic brain, is where we house all our emotions. So all of a sudden, that child in your program or in your home will be playing in the sandbox, or will be playing with the water or a toy, and someone else will come and pull their toy and pick it up, and it'll push their emotional buttons for the first time. And they will start crying, hitting, kicking, and biting. And that's because their emotions woke up. So our job description becomes to teach emotional literacy, to teach how to identify emotions and to calm emotions. And then finally, the third part of our brain, as we walk up the staircase vertically this time, since our other 2 speakers talked about the horizontal, is the top of our brain. And the top of our brain, the cortex or the prefrontal cortex or the forebrain, is responsible for our logical thinking and reasoning. And that's why we teach, not punish children. That's how we develop a child with a whole brain. And I think thinking of it from a whole brain parenting and educator perspective, we can help children by teaching them to grow up to be humane by identifying their feelings and solving their problems. So I'm glad we're all here today to talk about this, because universally, we all want a planet that is peaceful, where people get along, they respect differences, and they act in humane ways. And when we raise our children with whole brain in mind, that's the way our planet will be in the future. So thank you for having me today.
That was some really beautiful and meaningful takeaways by our esteemed panel. Miss Julie, I really like the way you spoke about the survival brain. I think that is so important that most of our parents and educators don't think about it. We got to nurture the emotional intelligence in children right from when they're toddlers, because that is so important, because the limbic brain has just kicked in, and then it's going to trigger all sorts of emotions like you mentioned. I mean, so beautifully, all 3 of you have put across that we cannot be talking about one side of the brain. We've got to be talking about the whole brain together, and we've got to learn how to integrate it. So whether it's the parents who are working with the babies and toddlers, or whether it's the educators in the schools, or now the online schools that have been working, they've got to understand these important knowledge takeaways, and we've got to work on them into our classrooms. So that brings us to our second round of discussion. And in the second round of discussion, I shall be giving each one panelist a question, and each one of them is going to get about 10 minutes to brainstorm and discuss about it with our viewers. So my first question is to Ms. Julie. Brain is a complex organ, that's what we've just established. And if you could let us know, how does the knowledge of the brain, or the structure of the brain, or the developing brain as we call it, because the brain is yet developing for young babies and toddlers. So does the knowledge of neuroscience or understanding the structure about the brain really helps parents and educators and the other stakeholders that are there working with younger children? So how can we utilize this knowledge into our work life, and how can we benefit our children?
Oh, absolutely. It's such a good question. And I'm going to write down the time so I don't go over 10 minutes and look at my clock here. We talked, or we all talked about the brain, and I talked about it from these 4 parts. I talked about 3 parts earlier. The hindbrain, which is fight, flight, freeze, responsible for your heart rate, your breathing, your blood pressure, keeping you alive. The midbrain, the limbic brain, is responsible for emotions and the relationships and learning how to attach and trust and love and get along and have empathy. And that top green part of our brain is the prefrontal cortex. That's our air traffic control system, responsible for thinking and reasoning and empathy and perspective taking, problem solving. And children are born with an immature sensory system. Did you know it takes an average of 25 years if you have no trauma history, no mental health vulnerabilities like anxiety, no maybe developmental delays, approximately 25 years. So you can already say, if you're a parent or a teacher, when a child throws a tantrum or they get out of control and dysregulated, that's their job description. Yay, good for you. Now my job is to teach you how to feel safe, then to teach you how to identify your emotions and express them, to teach you how to calm them. And then when you're calm, you'll have access to your thinking and reasoning brain. And the way I like to look at it is giving every child a voice. Now, when I was a little girl, I had a lot of trauma. That's why I've written 4 books on trauma, and I train all over the world on trauma. I won't talk a lot about that today, but what I will talk about is how to give every child a voice. I know that when I was a little girl, I used to have this recurring nightmare that this scary invisible man would be chasing me around my garage, and I couldn't get out of the nightmare. And if I could just scream, that somebody in my house would wake me up. And when I would scream, if you could see my face, it would look like this, and no voice would come out. And I, now at the age of 54, learned that that was a lot from my trauma, losing my voice and not being able to fight, flight, or freeze when things were scary in my home. And so let's start with this. How do we give children a voice? One is by moving our own voice as adults from what's wrong with you. Whenever we see a child and we're like, what is wrong with you? Why did you do that? Basically, we are yelling at them, or we're punishing them or bribing them. And that does not give the child a voice, but we can move our voice to what happened to you, which is Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey's book, right? What happened to you? That's a little more trauma informed. It's wondering if something happened that caused the behavior. But today I'd like to challenge all of us to move to a muscle that's very difficult, which is, what is your behavior communicating? Now, this is the hardest voice to have when a child is coming at us with challenging behavior. Let me show you this visual to look a little more deeply. Whenever we're faced with any human with challenging behavior, all we see is the shark fin and the storm they're creating around us. And I think we need to, by giving children a voice, is by looking past the shark fin to the goldfish and wondering, what is your behavior communicating? Now, some kids' behavior in the moment is communicating that we're trying to gain someone or something. Some kids' behavior is communicating, I was just trying to avoid something or someone. And some kids' behavior is communicating, I just wanted to express an emotion. And the last one, which we won't talk a lot about today, is when it is a child who's experienced a lot of trauma and they have a trigger, they are communicating that they feel unsafe. And so I think that the first thing when we think about working with a child with the brain in mind, all we have to do is adopt a mantra. Every time we see a challenging behavior, what's the child communicating? Now, I wish that I could push their belly button and get a printout that said, this is what my behavior is communicating. This is the best thing to do with me. But we have to be investigators and curious and scientists and wonder for each child what it's communicating. Now, we already talked about this, but I think this is absolutely shocking. Between 0 and 6 or 7, the children are building 1 million new neural connections every second. This is unbelievable. This means that we can no longer say, well, they go home to that family and there's so much toxic stress and trauma. I can't do anything to my supervisor, so we should kick this kid out of the program. We don't have to do that anymore because we have the power and the control to rewire children's brains, even if we spend 4 minutes with them a day, just by how we interact with them. This is a visual of that. Look how much the neurosynaptic connectors children have at birth, and then how much at about 6 years old. The new job description for early childhood educators should be a brain architect, I think. I think it should be, you are a brain architect and we're hiring you. And this is so important. Everything should be brain-based. We're going to move from child management and managing kids and punishing them and giving them rewards to developing children to becoming a brain architect. And that's why we're here today. I think there are 4 steps to growing a humane being. The first one is teaching sensory and emotional literacy. We all know what this is. Emotional literacy is teaching feelings when children are calm, but sensory literacy is noticing what's happening inside my body. For you as an adult, think of it this way. Have you ever gotten a stomach ache or a headache when you have too much stress or neck pain? Your body's very wise, and the survival part of your brain, your hindbrain, sends physical messages through your body. It says, Hello, I'm going to give you a stomach ache just so you can know that you have too much stress right now. Please pay attention to us, or it'll give you feelings. Oh my God, I'm so angry right now. Or it'll give you thoughts in your prefrontal cortex. I just feel like punching that person in the face. We have these 3 clues, and the more we teach kids to be aware of those clues, then we have to teach kids to be aware of it inside of them. And then we have to teach them how to regulate it. Do you know how much work it is to teach kids to build a self-regulation toolkit? The tools that they need to calm their body down. I still have a hard time with that. When I have big emotions and big sensations, sometimes it's hard for me to not allow myself to get hijacked by my survival brain and want to fight, flight, freeze, but instead take a breath, count to 10, and be able to access then my thinking brain so I can find solutions, which is number 4 to my problems, for the greater good, not just my good. Just to give a little bit more examples of the difference between sensations and feelings, sensations are the physiological happenings that happen inside my body when there's a trigger or an energy charge. And feelings are those things that we have inside of us, like mad, sad, angry, and happy. We don't even have to think about the brain. We just have to think about how we raise children, and that's whole brain thinking. And I like to think of it this way too. Whenever there's a trigger that happens, let's say you have a child in your classroom who you say it's nap time. And the child gets triggered. We don't know why. Maybe something happened to them at night. Maybe they're scared at night. Maybe they had trauma. We don't know. But what we can observe is the sensations of the child. They might be holding their stomach because they're frozen like an iceberg. Or their feelings. They might look scared because they're holding their fists and their face looks terrified. Or their thoughts, maybe they're old enough to be able to share their thoughts or their feelings. We don't know. But what we do know is most of what we see as adults is just the challenging behavior. They are not paying attention. They're being bad. They're bothering all the other kids. And then we try to stop it because we go into our survival brain. So we want to punish them or threaten them or say, we'll call your mother or your father, instead of helping them feel safe, helping figure out what's the meaning behind their behavior. Now, before I close, I'll show you one video of a child in America who was adopted from our foster care system. And his foster parent was teaching him sensory and emotional literacy. And this is what a child looks like who has begun to learn when he's mad how to express himself. Let's watch. It's only 4 seconds.
I know I was starting to get mad. See my red cheeks?
I see your cheeks.
That means I'm getting mad.
Why are you getting mad? I mean,
See?
Now I will end with, because I have 1 minute left, another way to teach is through my app, and it's free, and you can find it on my website here, but you download the app and it is specifically designed to teach kids sensory and emotional literacy, and they can express themselves non-verbally and verbally. There's a 22-minute video and a 16-page user guide that will teach you how to use it, but I'll briefly share the left arrow. The green area is when I feel calm and happy. The blue is when I feel frozen. And the orange is when I feel scared and I want to flight and run away. And the red is when I feel in that fight mode. And when the children move the arrow down, they can then move the feeling faces down to the face or take a picture of their own face, what it looks like, and practice when they're in those different zones. And finally, the sensation images on the right is where I can drag images into my body to communicate non-verbally or verbally. Oh, this is Harper. This is my niece. This is Harper in the red zone, the second picture showing she's in that fight mode where she feels angry. She feels like there's lightning bolts in her feet, making her want to kick, and a volcano in her stomach, and her heart's beating out of her chest. The more we teach kids to tune inward, the more they'll be healthy tuning outward. So thank you so much for having me today. And I so look forward to hearing from the other speakers. I will
Thank
stop
you so
sharing.
much, Ms. Julie. I think some wonderful thoughts that you have put across for our audience. One of the best thought that I like was, let's all be brain architects. I think we as educators, early as educators, are extremely responsible for becoming brain architects, and let's help children not only self-regulate their emotions, but also let's understand why are they going through these emotions. So thank you so much for your beautiful thought on it. And truly, we've really got to understand the structure of the brain and understand why does the survival brain help and what does the limbic brain do, and so on. So I think it is extremely crucial for educators and for parents to understand this so that they could deal with their toddlers and kindergartners in a more effective way. Thank you so much for your thoughts.
Amrit, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you for reminding. So through our communication in our first round, we've understood that the right brain is more creative and the left side of the brain is more logical. So is there a way that we could integrate both the sides of the hemisphere? And if there are ways, how can we stimulate learning? And what are the benefits of doing that for a parent or an educator?
Hi, everyone. Hi, thank you. That was for me, right? Just in 1 second. I'm just going to bring my screen. Can you see my screen? Is it there now?
Your screen is visible.
Perfect. Sorry, give me 1 minute. So today we're going to look at how we can integrate both the left and the right brain. As we mentioned, we're going to be focusing on the whole brain. What can we do to stimulate development in that record in an early year setting? Okay, so as we've mentioned earlier, these are some of the words that have come up when we've spoken about the left and the right brain. So just going to be listing these words again. So obviously on the left side, you're more analytical thinkers. We look at numbers, language, reasoning, logic, science, math, sequencing, language, and reality-based. And on your right side, if you're right-brained, they say you're emotional, intelligent, your imagination, expression, artistic, intuitive, creative, exploration, feelings, music, and risk-taking. So these are some of the things that typically are associated with each side of the brain. And we're aware that some of the myths out there is that we know that our brain is divided into 2 hemispheres and they are anatomically separate, but also they function differently. Now, the conventional wisdom tells us our unique personality, our thought process and behavior are influenced whether we are right-brained or left-brained. But today we're looking at how we can integrate both of them and become whole brain thinkers. So the right-brained individuals are supposedly very creative, the big picture thinkers, very much emotionally driven, and whereas we have the left-brained individuals who tend to be more analytical and logical. So what I want to do today is speak to you about how we're going to be coming away from these 2 notions of these completely different personalities and how we can combine these 2 personalities within the classroom and create classroom setups and create classroom atmospheres with well-informed educators within the classroom setting to support the whole brain development within the day at the settings that we have. Much research, as Archana mentioned, has said that there's no such thing as brain-sidedness, and we're aware of that. So we're very much aware that the whole notion of brain-sidedness is a myth. So taking that information forward, how can we stimulate the whole brain within a classroom setup? And this is what I'll be looking at today. We'll be looking at the whole brain development within an educational setting. Again, just regurgitating the information that we have already spoken about our brains. And as Julie mentioned, at birth, the brain is about 1/4 of the size of an adult brain. Incredibly, actually doubles within the first year, and it keeps growing to about 80% of an adult-sized brain until the child is 3, and by about 5 years old is already 90% fully grown. Young children in the first 3 years are by default right-brained, as we're very much aware, and therefore don't have the ability to use logic and words to express their feelings. And then again, as we mentioned, from 3 years onwards, the left brain begins to kick in. So what can we do as early years educators to fully nurture the child in their developmental journey to cater for both sides of their brain? Now, how to stimulate both hemispheres of the brain. The child's brain development is strongly influenced by their learning environments, and that's something that we'll be looking at today, and the interactions that they have with people around them. So what can we do within our settings as early years educators to support both hemispheres of the brain? We need to provide opportunities for children to communicate and play freely and actively, as it's a phenomenal way of promoting whole brain development. We need to set up classrooms that are directly linked to children's brain development. We need to make sure the environments are safe. We do need to make sure that the environments are supportive, they're inclusive. We don't keep certain children away from particular areas, or we include all types of children and all abilities. We have to make sure that our classroom environments are engaging. They don't become boring, they're not repetitive. There's always something new going on to challenge children. There's lots of elements of risk-taking, calculated risk-taking within the classroom. That's going to keep children energetic and engaged and involved. We want to, again, keep on challenging them. We need to create environments where they're able to interact with other children as well as play individually and within their own comfort zones. So there we need to be able to sit down when we look at our classrooms and stand back and look at the setup that we have and how we're going to organize those setups to support children's development by bringing in elements of both brain, right brain and left brain, to support both emotion and cognition within the classroom. I'm going to now show you a few pictures of some classroom design that actually, before I do that, I'd like you to just look at these words again. I did bring these up on one of the first slides when I started the presentation. I just want you to keep these words in mind when you look at the pictures that I'm going to show you next. And the reason I'm going to do that is I want you to be able to see the collaboration of the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain, and elements of both sides together within the classroom setup. So when a child is in a particular area, you're able to cater for both areas of the brain with communication with each other. So the first picture, these are some of the pictures that I usually use when I'm doing my training, when I'm training my teachers as to how they could set up the classroom to bring about both elements. We want children to feel safe and secure within their environments. We want them to be able to interact with other children. We want them to be able to use their creative side as well as being able to use their logical side. We want them to be able to predict, make assumptions, make predictions, as well as keep their artistic and the emotional side active. So some of these pictures are of settings within a learning environment that cater for both sides of the hemisphere and support both sides of learning, integrating both sides and catering for the whole brain development. So you can see within the first picture, we have pictures, we have books there. So obviously we're incorporating literacy, we're incorporating creativity, we're incorporating interests and the social side of this topic here. Now the next picture, you can see children are interacting with it, both within themselves and with each other. There's a setup there allowing for 2 or 3 children to play together as well as play individually. Children are then focusing on their own interests as well as interacting with each other. This again, we're looking at habitats, we're looking at animals, we're looking at logical things, we're looking at sizes, so mathematics will come in as well as the emotional side of their involvement within the class. Again, we have an area that this picture here usually brings lots of interest about, lots of loose parts. So loose parts plays a really fantastic way of incorporating both sides of the hemisphere, both sides of the brain, the logical side. So the children are looking at velocity, they're looking at speed, they will be looking at height, weight, but then they're also enjoying themselves. So they're interacting with each other as well. They're still catering for the left side of their brain too. So there's lots of remote interaction going on, lots of language will be being brought about, lots of scientific and mathematical knowledge will also be incorporated within this environment here as well. Again, the same with the popsicle sticks. a very enjoyable activity. Again, we're looking at patterns, we're looking at logical thinking, we're looking at mathematics, as well as looking at the emotions, interaction, playfulness, and confidence there too. So these are some of the environments here. So again, we've got interaction going on, lots of emotional interaction between the children sitting down reading a book. Again, simultaneously, alongside it, we have the literacy as well. So that's a collaboration of both sides of the brain as well. The picture on the other side, again, the same. So while I'm going through these pictures, you can see that both the words that are associated with the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain have been collaborated very well when these areas have been planned within the classroom setup. Again, you can see lots of interaction there. We're looking at plants, they're looking at seeds, so then the science comes in, mathematics comes in, as well as their artistic abilities, as well as the interaction. There'll be lots of communication going on, as well as lots of logical thinking. The dinosaur setup, we're looking at science, we're looking at habitats, as well as playfulness and enjoyment. Again, the same will be happening in these setups here. We're looking at science, we're looking at how we can sprout onions, as well as children, you can see they're enjoying themselves. So again, catering for both sides. Some more pictures here. Again, science, enjoyment, volume, velocity, pouring, measuring all these things, shadows. There's a huge collaboration of both sides of the brain being utilized within these classrooms. So when we do our planning with our teachers, we do ask them to sit down and look at the whole classroom. We look at the whole aspect of both sides. Are we catering for all areas of learning? Are we catering for communication and language, as well as science and investigation, as well as creativity and arts, and nurturing and emotional and social development, and understanding of the world? So these are those different aspects that we do ask educators to look at when they set up their classrooms, when they do their planning. And the same thing we can actually send across to the parents for information and say, when you set up different play areas within your classroom, are you within your rooms, children's classrooms, bedrooms, are you catering for all aspects of learning? Are we only focusing on the logical side, the educational side of learning, or are we being able to incorporate the emotional, the interaction, relationships, the creativity? Are we being able to support both sides of a child's personality? Because that's something that we really need to cater for if we are to support the notion of whole brain development, both aspects of brain development. Otherwise, there are some settings who are very much focusing on the academic side, even at such a young age. And we find that the left side of the brain is more catered for than the right side of the brain, the left side of the brain is more catered for than the right side, which does not support the notion of the whole brain and the whole child development, or vice versa. So there needs to be a collaboration of both. If we have an enjoyable setting in the classroom, if there's a setting that children are really enjoying, what are the outcomes, what are the learning objectives within that area? And what else can we add to that area to support learning further? We may have a sand pit, we may have a water turf tray. What can we add to that area to be able to cater for the learning objectives we have in mind for those children? I really don't know how long I've been speaking for. I'm going on. So that's basically our notion of collaborating both areas of the brain within the classroom setup to be able to cater for children's learning and development. There is a quote here that always stands out to me, is logic will get you from A and B, but imagination will take you everywhere. So it's really important to be able to cater for both within a classroom setting. Thank you, Amrit, and thank you, team.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shamila. I really like the way that you have put across how play is so important for brain development. And I think as early as educators, we know play is important and the highest form of expression in early childhood, as very rightly said by Frobel. And as early as educators and parents with toddlers and kindergartners, I feel play is a must into our homes and into our classrooms, and we must ensure that children are playing day in and day out, whether it's a sandbox, whether it is your pretend play corner, whether we'll be giving them just anything where they want to make use of empty boxes, empty tools, utensils, and you just give it to a child and they make the best use of it. And that's how both the sides of their brain are getting integrated. Thank you so much. That was a lovely presentation and eye-opener to most of us, reiterating that play is important for brain and brain development. So moving on to Miss Archana. Miss Archana, now that we've understood that, brain-based play, brain-based learning is very important, according to you, do you think that educators should have a neuroscience perspective into teaching? If yes, then how can educators and parents at home adapt neural education in our day-to-day teaching and learning? And if that's so, then does lifestyle also affect us? Lifestyle, when I mean lifestyle, I mean food choices, I mean what timing do we sleep? Does it impact our learning and memory? So if you could throw some light on that, would be great.
Thank you. Thank you. And those were indeed lovely presentations and explanations by my co-panelists. So talking about neuroscience perspective in teaching, focus of mechanism and how things work is what the neuroscience perspective in teaching is all about. Although there is skepticism that education is all about behavioral outcomes, and it is the effect of instruction on the same. Why should we worry about what is going on in the brain so long as the kids are learning what they're supposed to learn, right? So I would argue that from both the psychological and neuroscience perspective, there is a mechanistic understanding of what is going on. Let me give you an analogy here. It's been almost 400 years that we became aware that the bark of the cinchona tree is effective in treating malaria, right? And then post that, there has been a drastic improvement in natural sciences, biology, biochemistry, and then we came to the conclusion that, oh, this is this active agent called quinine in the bark of the cinchona tree, which is actually effective in treating malaria. We could have stopped at, taking the bark and just working. Why did we have to do so much of research? Right? As simple as that. We need to upskill, we need to upgrade. The same thing applies to the classroom scenario. Yes, undoubtedly, we have come to a stage where we know what works in the classroom that gives a deeper understanding, a deeper knowledge of the mechanism to optimize the learning outcome and gives us a broader picture of what works, how does it work, and how do we improve it further. That doesn't mean that every educator, every teacher has to be a neuroscientist in order to get to this level. Why is it important that we need to understand the basics of what goes on in the brain and how does it actually impact the classroom scenario? We've been used to rote learning all our lives, right? So it is just that you need to have certain measures, certain things, and then it is enough. As long as you are getting good grades, as long as you are successful academically, it is enough. But how have we actually try to understand what is it that will last long with the child? So in fact, neuroscience in the classroom, I would better say it is common sense in education explained from a science perspective, right? So educational neuroscience is integration of psychology, neuroscience, and education. So this knowledge improves both the learning and the teaching. So what does it take to make learning stick? This is what we have to understand. There is no learning without emotion, first thing. We need emotion to acquire new knowledge, to retain the knowledge, for thinking, problem solving, and also for focused attention. Our brains are emotionally charged. We need to understand that when you attach emotions to something, it is all the more important. And that is where a child is just trying to understand what things are. And if we confuse him with just bookish knowledge, it's not going to add any value there. So we need to apply the knowledge that we have acquired through our emotional understanding, positive reinforcement, and help the child be a motivated learner. Now, what is a motivated learner? I think teachers, like Ms. Julie just said, teachers are architects. I would say teachers are engineers. They are shaping the brains of our children. I think they are doing one of the most amazing jobs. And it is not that we have a set mold, otherwise we are just manufacturing new products. That's not the case. We need to understand as educators, we can offer learning, but we just cannot open the student's head, dump all the knowledge, put the lid back. That is practically not possible. So students are basically themselves responsible to get these learnings. Why is it that they're not doing them? Is it fear of failure? Is it fear of committing mistakes? Allow them to make mistakes. Nobody is perfect. Haven't we learned through our mistakes? Were we all born knowing how to ride a bicycle? Didn't we fall, scrape our knee, bump our head? But yes, we got up. We tried, learned. And that is how we allow our children to learn. Create that safe environment, like Ms. Nazim was telling. Create that safe environment in the classrooms where children are able to experiment, not afraid to make mistakes, not being ridiculed, not being criticized, but experimenting, learning is what will last a lifetime. We need to look at our own behavior. Do we make mistakes? Do we ask questions? Do we take feedback? Because this is what children are doing. We are their role models. They are emulating us. Children are very good copycats. So we need to be extra cautious when we are emulating something in the classroom. So like I was telling, neuroscience is not a magic pill. It is not going to solve all classroom problems, but yes, it definitely helps understand. It definitely stimulates an evolution in education when the knowledge is shared with teachers, parents, and other educations. So we can start with debunking neuromyths. Now, what is a neuromyth? The bookish definition, a misconception generated by a misunderstanding or misreading or a misquoting of facts, scientifically established by brain research to make a case for the use of brain research in education or other contexts. Let me make it simpler. An example of a neuromyth is that learning is enhanced if people are classified and taught according to their preferred learning styles. We classify children into visual, auditory, kinesthetic learners, right? But how appropriate is this? Are we not creating those distinctions? Are we not putting it in the mind of a child that, okay, this child is capable only of this? It is an overload, not only for the child, but also for the educator. So what are the problems with learning styles? First thing, as mentioned here, the definition and the assessment. There are 13 models of learning styles, and we have these few which we have categorized and we try to focus on. Are these accurate? Can we ask learners themselves, what type of a learner are you? Right? There is no evidence that teaching to preferred learning style enhances learning. Research suggests that teaching to styles, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, may actually be cognitive overload for learners. So how does the belief in myth manifests itself. It actually creates that learner helplessness. Right. So if we are categorizing children and assessing, okay, so this is how the child learns, and we are not giving the child to experiment, be creative, learn, the child will come to a stage where he is like, I can't do it. This is not my style. Right. And then, no, see, come on, I am a visual learner. If you are just going to give me a verbal session, I'm not going to understand. It's no point. There's no use of it. That will never work with me. And finally, they come to the conclusion, why bother? Come on, it's not going to work. So we are doing that. So until and unless educators understand that this is not how it is, we are axing our own legs. We are restricting the potential. Just like this. How are baby elephants trained? The calf is chained at a very young age. The calf tries very hard to escape, but it is not possible because the chain is too strong. And when this happens for years together, and the calf is now a full-grown adult elephant, he thinks that the chain is stronger than me. The neural pathways are built. It's over. You tie a small thread and the elephant will not move because he thinks that I will not escape. What's the point? So if we are not allowing a child to experiment, understand the child's view, help him grow, this is what we are doing to our children. There are also emotions and beliefs. Instill faith in a child, encourage child, creative thinking, evidence-based approach, help children learn faster, like the Pygmalion effect. If a teacher just tells the child, you're amazing, you can do it, the child will do it, he will accomplish it. Now, that's called the Pygmalion effect. So people are influenced by expectations built upon them. And when we build this at a very young age, that is going to last a lifetime. Using insight from neuroscience to improve education. So how? I think, the knowledge of the brain implies that everybody can get better. Not that I am limited with my arithmetic knowledge, my math is not good, or I'm not good at language skills. As long as neuroplasticity, Ms. Julie was mentioning, yes, now this is the magic element. You have the ability to grow. The brain is so very plastic that you can just accumulate everything. The more you strengthen it, the neural pathways are strengthened and you master it one day. So how wonderful would it be if we could better stimulate the potential of each child? Not to get better grades in terms of academic excellence, but in enhancing their learning motivation, igniting their curiosity, and encouraging their creativity, foster the belief that they have in themselves. If you agree with me, with my views, I would like to invite all of you to start reading, investigating about this fascinating approach to education. Embrace the idea. Now, this is for organizations. Embrace the idea. Share the knowledge, spread the word. Between all of us, we can make this happen. Now, talking about how habits can influence, definitely, Ms. Nagpal. Let's take about just the sleeping habit. Now, these two images here, the brain images while sleeping, while awake. If we see the brain is as active in the REM sleep stage as when we are awake. So if we are actually not having, or sleep deprivation is one thing which is going to impact memory and learning, because we have something called the circadian rhythm. If this is disturbed, it is going to give rise to a host of problems. This is, I think, a topic for another day, but yes, undoubtedly food habits, dietary habits, and sleep patterns, any other habit for that matter, can impact the learning. I think we all need to unlearn this learner paralysis that we've been having and believe that challenging kids need love and not punishment. Come out of the Skinner's rule. Ultimately, a child's mental health is more important than the grades. So I would like to conclude with this.
Thank you so much, Ms. Archana. There were some wonderful and valuable takeaways that a child needs love more than punishment. Let's all come out of the Skinner's box. A big thank you to all our panelists. Extremely valuable, enlightening takeaways for educators and parents, right from our brain being architects, from understanding about child development, to learned helplessness, to understanding that the learning environment at home and in the school plays an important role. And like most of us keep saying, play is the highest form of expression, even for the brain to develop. So thank you so much, all our esteemed panelists, for enlightening our viewers on the same. Moving on, I would just like to make an announcement. ECDF is coming up with an e-conference, Global Early Childhood Education Conclave 2021, our second edition. It is themed towards holistic and multidisciplinary early childhood education. It's on 30th and 31st of July from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. So all the educators and parents who are looking forward to come at the conference, you may inquire at ecdfad@gmail.com. We'll be more than happy to address your queries. Thank you all the listeners and the participants. This was a very challenging topic, but all our esteemed panelists have simplified it for everybody. If you have more questions on the same, we will definitely get back to you with another webinar on a similar topic. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening ahead and a lovely weekend ahead. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.